Hello, and welcome to the 30th episode of Recluse Horror. This is a daily horror movie review podcast. Just a little background on the project. Back in April of last year, I decided I wanted to watch and review a horror movie every single day. I have done so for the past 297 days, I believe. Although only the last 30 have been podcasts. Before that, it was only text reviews. So each episode, I talk about one movie that I've watched that very night, and another that I've reviewed previously in text, and just go over whatever impressions that I have left, aided, of course, by the text review. So the movie I have to talk about today is Dismissed from 2017. It was okay. I don't have anybody with me today, so it's just gonna be me talking about this movie. But having watched it, I feel like I should have waited and watched it with Sam, which is how I feel when I pick any movie that I, am not watching with Sam a lot of the time, because I'm like, oh, Sam would probably like this because of this, or, oh, I bet Sam would hate this. This would be funny. And, yeah, so I end up, almost watching no movies, or watching really crappy movies because, he's not able to do an episode, he's got stuff to do or whatever. This one I didn't realize, though, would be something that would be funny to talk to him about. The lead in this, his name is, I think it's Dylan Spruce. He's Zach from The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. I don't think he really watched a ton of it, but he watched more episodes than me, which was none. But I didn't realize that until I looked that aspect up, because he did look vaguely familiar. I did know his face, but yeah, it was from Zach and Cody. He was also in Big Daddy, the Adam Sandler movie. He was the kid, I don't know what the kid's name was. I don't even know if I've seen that whole movie. But yeah, I mean this apparently he was one of the twins in The Sweet Life and Zach and Cody, and I know that he's seen some of the episodes of that. So maybe this would have been a good one to have him in on, but it also wasn't super great. Personally, I didn't feel so. For one thing, it's listed as a horror movie on IMDb. It's listed as horror, thriller. And honestly, I understand the designation to a degree, but I really feel like it's more of a thriller than it is a horror movie. And again, it's not really a very good one to me. Dylan Spruce, I hope that's the right person, and it's not the other Spruce, but I don't know what the other one's name is, so I think it's Dylan Spruce. Anyway, his performance is actually pretty good. There's a couple of spots where I didn't quite buy it, but he's pretty good. He plays opposite somebody, though, that doesn't do a super great job a lot of the time. I went back and forth through the whole movie on whether or not I thought he was actually decent, or if he wasn't very good, and then I realized what the problem was. But anyway. Dismissed is about a student he's a transfer student into this English class at a different school, and when the English teacher gives him a B+ rather than an A, he's an honor student, he decides that he's going to change that grade essentially by any means necessary. So, it's just kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, even the premise of that sounds like a thriller. It doesn't have very many horror elements in the filmmaking, in the premise, in the visuals, or anything. I mean, it just doesn't feel like a horror movie. Again, it feels like a thriller, and that's totally fine. You can be a thriller. I just wouldn't have watched this with the intention of reviewing it had I not done, had I realized that it was really more of a thriller, and not a good one, like I said. This is rated by Google users at 92% liked it. So apparently there's a lot of Zack and Cody fans that are on rating movies on Google. On IMDb, I actually thought it had a higher score for some reason. I must have looked at a different movie, but it had like a 5.4 or something, which is about what I felt like it was. It's not terrible. As I was saying though before the synopsis, the actor playing the teacher was he was very hit and miss. He was very good at playing the sort of regular, vanilla white guy teacher. Kind of a goon and a little bit of a just a schlubby kind of teacher who, not hates his job, but is a little bit disillusioned with his job and his students, not really being engaged in his class or caring about anything. He does the stressed out family member thing very well. All of the more normal parts of like being a human being that like is probably suffering from depression and just trying to make ends meet and like live up to your own expectations. I feel like all of that stuff was really good. But anytime he had to do anything where like this is not a scenario that happens in everyday life, I felt like that's when he really struggled. And I don't really understand. I mean, for casting purposes, you want somebody who can do that. If you're doing a thriller, if you're doing a horror movie, whatever, then you need to test that ability in your cast. Maybe not first and foremost, because most movies they're not at that emotional level all the time, but it is something that you need to check for, and he just doesn't sell it. It took me a long time to realize that's what it was. I went back and forth, as I said, on whether or not I felt like, no, he's doing a good job. He's doing a good job. No, wait, I don't know if he's doing such a good job. I kept going back and forth until about maybe 20 minutes to the end of the movie where I fell on the line and decided, yeah, no, he's just not very good at those moments. And it's a level of bad I wouldn't expect considering how mostly well he sells the other parts. Just anytime he has to be in any high stress, like unrealistic to reality situations. I mean, not that nobody has gone through the things that he goes through in this movie, but that a normal human being mostly wouldn't encounter, that's when he struggles. And those are the important moments. Those are the pivotal moments in making your horror movie feel like a horror movie. Or your thriller feel like a thriller. And it just doesn't quite sell. There are a couple of moments from Dylan Spruce with the same slight, just touch of a problem, but he still does much better on that. And it might be due to the nature of his character. I couldn't say for sure, but just a couple of barely moments where it wasn't so great. Most of his performance was actually really good. I would not have expected that to be like a Disney star performance. It doesn't seem like a Disney star performance, which I'm sure is what he was going for. According to his IMDb page, before this he hadn't done any acting work for the last, 6 years. And this was sort of his return to acting. And I honestly think it's a fairly decent comeback. It's too bad it wasn't just like a better movie. But I think it's hard for, child actors and reformed child actors and just anybody who's ever been a star on Disney to really be taken seriously in any manner. So this wasn't a bad move. I think is grading it along that scale of I don't want to call it a comeback. Sorry, I didn't mean to quote that song. But yeah, I mean, just his return, his return to acting, it's not a bad return. It's not a terrible movie to have come back to, and it's not a terrible performance. In fact, it's a pretty good performance. There wasn't really much artistry, in my personal opinion, when it came to any of the, cinematography or the color palette or anything like that. None of the camera work really felt like it added to the suspense of the movie very much. There's a couple of pretty neat shots in one particular scene, that I can't really talk about, but a lot of that has to do with the location of the filming. But, they chose to film in that location, and it's definitely not something that they necessarily had to do. They kind of did. No, they kind of did. Well, regardless, I mean, regardless of the reason, there were a couple of really good shots just in that one scene, and I don't remember any other shot that really appealed to me on any, visual level. I did think that the costume choices for Lucas is the name of the character. It's Dylan Spruce's character, the honor student. I liked his costume. His wardrobe was good. It sort of fit with everything. And honestly, the character isn't written terribly either. He's obviously a teacher's pet, and he's a bit pompous and maybe not quite elevated to the level of arrogant. I think I would call it something adjacent to arrogant, but not arrogant. And the character feels pretty genuine for the story that they're trying to build. The teacher's character is also pretty interesting. Again, he feels like a pretty normal kind of like worn out dude, somebody who's been teaching for a long time and not quite burned out, but really you can see him heading down that path if things don't change. And I think that's where a lot of people get to in their careers. I know I certainly recently had the same sort of burnout, and hopefully my choice to sort of change my field and get my priorities in order, hopefully that will work out for me personally. But yeah, I don't know. The characters are pretty strong. There's some elements of the script that I disliked. I honestly felt sort of in the same way that Lucas is pretty pompous. I felt like the script itself is a little I don't know, high-minded. I don't know if the screenwriter realized that he was doing this, but he sort of compares the script of this movie to Crime and Punishment, the Dostoevsky novel, which, if you know anything about Russian literature, I'm sure anybody's probably heard the title at least, but it's not, that's a very, very strong thing to be comparing yourself to, you know. You don't want to invite comparison to what's considered some of the best literature on the face of the planet, you know. There's also this whole thing that they use, this whole sort of like metaphor that they use throughout the movie, and it's a storytelling device in a few ways, about Iago from Othello. That is, at first I kind of liked it. I liked the way that they used it in the beginning, but the way that they use it later on in the film just starts to feel a little tired. The way that, you know, I don't know. I won't get into it, but again, you're sort of comparing yourself or your characters to some of what people consider to be the best written literature in history, and it's not necessarily the right move unless your script is really that strong, and I didn't quite feel like this one was. It's not a bad script, honestly. I think with some adjustments and some more focus on visuals and cinematography and, you know, color palette and building tension, I think the script would have succeeded a little bit better with more support, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But that said, it's not Crime and Punishment. It's not Othello. It's, you know, it's just a thriller. And a pretty average one at that, honestly. So I looked up the director and the writer of this movie, and they don't seem to have done anything that I'm particularly familiar with. So, I mean, I guess it's just a smaller film, and, you know, if this is indeed, like, a truly independent film, then it's actually not too bad, but it, you know, it just, there's just nothing really to recommend it. It's definitely not bad. Again, you know, and I've said this, you know, this is usually my bar here. Like, I wouldn't walk out of the room if somebody were watching it or anything, but, I probably wouldn't sit and watch it. I'd probably want to change it if somebody wasn't completely dedicated to it. That said, if you are a fan of Zach and Cody or whatever, and you really wanted to see, the Spruces do more work, I think the other twin has been working still steadily since then. I don't know that to be true, but regardless, if you've been wanting to see what Zach and Cody are up to, definitely check this movie out. He gives a good performance, and it's probably worth sitting through the rest of the movie. If you're really into thrillers, I guess this isn't. I mean, it's not a good thriller, but it's not the worst. If you've seen literally everything else that can be qualified as a thriller, you'll probably see a lot worse other than this one. I just think this one's kind of average. There's nothing particular that stands out about it. Really, the costumes are the closest thing, and they don't really stand out. They're just pretty good. And it's not just Zach, actually. I meant to say, or Zach. It's not just Lucas's costumes. There's another character, another female student, and her costumes are very good too. They're very pretty. And not terribly outside of the realm of what you expect these particular characters would be wearing too. So it does its job in two ways. It looks nice, and it does, and it feels authentic. Which is what you should be doing with costumes, unless you're just going completely over the top, and that's a whole different type of movie. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much anything I have to say about it. Zach and Cody fans, definitely check it out. Maybe thriller fans, horror fans, I think you can pretty much skip it. I don't think many horror fans would be into this one. But yeah, so that's my review of Dismissed from 2017. So the other movie that I wanted to talk about today, is Honeymoon from 2014. There's a couple of other films out there floating around from around the same time period called Honeymoon. This is the American one, English language anyway, from 2014. It wasn't bad. I feel like there are parts of this that I like a lot more, or that I appreciate a lot more. I watched this back in May, and in the sort of close to the middle of May, but towards the beginning of May. I felt like, I think some of the aspects of this I've come to appreciate the longer that they've sat with me. So, as you might have guessed from the title, this is about a newly married couple going on their honeymoon. They go to the wife's, a cabin in Canada, but not long after, something happens and the wife begins acting really strangely. So the acting was mostly good, but it took me a few scenes before I really bought any of the chemistry between the couple, which is not really good for a movie of this particular type. And especially with one that has such a small cast, it was a bit distracting. But once they got going, I felt like it didn't seem quite so forced. The acting independent of the relationship, that was also pretty fair. But there weren't very many standout moments. I felt like the actor playing the wife, I thought she did a pretty decent job in some of the scenes. She's played by an actor who was on Game of Thrones and Downton Abbey, while the husband is played by an actor from Penny Dreadful. So I was a bit surprised that there weren't more great moments from them. But I mean, part of that might be because of the script. I honestly don't remember exactly how each scene progresses. I remember the basics of the plot and my feelings on them, and I have the text review here to cheat off of. But yeah, I'm not positive because I read the books, but I only saw the first season of Game of Thrones, but I think the actress in this is the one that plays Ygritte, but I'm not sure. The lighting was very nice in some of the shots. That was a little dark in other ones. There weren't many terribly unique shots in the movie, but there were one or two, and the rest were filmed pretty solid in a way that didn't really have anything resembling a mistake. Yeah, there are some pretty good scenic shots in this, as I recall. I didn't notate anything about it in my review, but I do seem to recall there's some nice landscapes and so forth. I could be totally wrong. The makeup and effects were pretty good and were used effectively, I felt like. So, despite the chemistry being a little hit or miss in this, the couple was written just fine, I felt. The way the plot played out was mostly good enough, other than the ending. With a different ending, this could have been a pretty good movie. The build-up had some pretty interesting moments and kept you wondering what was going on in a passive sort of way, but the ending didn't really have any punch. It was sort of a standard ending without the sort of details that really could have made it interesting. So I've definitely said this before a lot in many of my reviews, but if you're going to make a genre horror movie, you need to find a way to set yourself apart from other movies in the subgenre. There are a lot of ways to do that, but this movie didn't really do any of those, instead leaving the movie feeling like it lacked a bit of vision. There are a number of unanswered questions at the end, but none of them really nagged me. So, other than answering those questions in a unique way, rather than leaving them, sort of clandestine, it would have probably made this for a really intriguing movie. Instead, it was just, it was pretty good. I mean, it's good. And again, some of the parts, as I said, upon reflection, I appreciate more than I think I did directly after it. So, the director and co-writer of this movie is Leigh Janiak. And it was the first and so far the only movie that she's directed. She's done some television stuff, but from a technical standpoint, it's a really solid first attempt at a movie. But hopefully her, sort of experience, working on television shows will give her more of what, she needed, build her up as an artist a little bit more, because she's currently attached to direct the remake of The Craft, and she co-wrote the script, but I guess it's being rewritten by the guy Daniel, I can't remember what his name is, but the guy who wrote 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I don't remember how I felt about that, which means I probably thought it was okay. I remember it. I don't know. I'll have to go over that movie. But that's another one that I reviewed in text, but I really have very little memory of it. But yeah, so anybody from that was alive in the 90s or was, alive in the aughts and had somebody who made them watch The Craft would be pretty excited to see a remake, or terrified that it was going to be terrible. So, I honestly could see her doing a good job on The Craft, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I wouldn't dissuade anyone from watching Honeymoon themselves. It's harmless. It's just a little sort of unremarkable. It's one of two movies that I think are both still on Netflix called Honeymoon. So just check the years to see which one is the right one. Again, this one's from 2014, and it's in English, so you should be able to figure out on that basis. But yeah, I don't know, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Unfortunately, I hate doing movie reviews where both of my reviews are kind of like, but that's kind of how these are. I did feel like Honeymoon was better than Dismissed, but it probably depends on your tastes a little bit. If you're more into thrillers, why are you listening to this? But no, if you're more into thrillers, you might like Dismissed more. Otherwise, Honeymoon definitely has some moments that were sort of unnerving, I guess. I mean, I've seen so much stuff, and I didn't mention anything about the movie being unnerving, but I have some recollection of being like, oh, people would be sort of not freaked out, but yeah, just unnerved by this or put off a little bit by this, by certain parts of the movie. So, I don't know if that's actually true to life, and I apologize if you watch this and it's just completely dull and boring. I do remember it being a little slow. But yeah, if you've seen everything else on Netflix and you've been avoiding this for one reason or another, yeah, it's not bad. I'd give it a watch. I mean, if you got nothing else on Netflix, it's definitely not the worst thing that you've seen off of Netflix. I guarantee you. So yeah, that's my review of Honeymoon from 2014, and I guess that's my show today. I'll probably be putting up tomorrow's episode early again, as we mentioned on the other episode. Sam has a thing tomorrow. He has a concert, a show, whatever you want to call it, with a bunch of his bands, and I will be attending, so I'll probably put this up before I leave to go see him. So, yeah. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, review, whatever, on whatever site that you found us. The best thing that you can do to help out the show is to share it. And thank you for, I probably already mentioned this before, at least parts of it. So I was talking to the people behind, the creators behind Don't Move and The Birch yesterday on Twitter, and they retweeted my reviews, my reviews of both of those movies, actually. And also Make Do Entertainment, who made the Jester movies, they retweeted my my review of that as well, and you know, said that they were glad that you know, their movies could help somebody who is in a bad spot or something like that, you know, that make me feel better, basically, that the movie made me feel better. So yeah, I mean, if for whatever reason they listened to anything that wasn't their own review, then any of you, thank you so much. And yeah, if you didn't like the platform that you found the podcast, or you want to share it with somebody who does not use a thing that you use, the podcast is available on YouTube, Player FM, Stitcher, iTunes, Podcast Addict, and pretty much any podcatcher. If you wanted to reach out to me on social media, you can find me, as I said, on Twitter and also on Instagram and Facebook, or you can email me at reclusehorror@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments or anything like that. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Thank you for listening. I apologize as this one is sort of on the short side and sort of, you know, lackluster opinions about everything, but sometimes you just get a couple of duds, and Honeymoon wasn't the next one on my list, and I thought Dismissed would be more of a horror movie, so... But again, I know I've said this 15 times, Zach was pretty good. Have a good night.